Human helped the alien girl hide among ice farmers until her royal seal activated in his hands. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. John Carter had never been one to seek adventure. Living in the far northern reaches of Earth, he was content with his quiet life as an ice farmer, tending to the frigid land that many others had abandoned. The freezing winds that swept across the barren landscape were the only companions he knew, and the long nights were filled with the hum of his small farm's machinery. It was a hard life, but it was his life. One day, as he made his way to the edge of the ice fields to check his traps, he saw something that caught his eye, a figure barely visible through the snowstorm. At first, he thought it was just the wind playing tricks on him, but then he saw her more clearly. A woman, dressed in strange, shimmering clothes that seemed out of place in such a harsh environment. She was struggling against the wind, her movements slow and labored. Without thinking, John ran toward her, his boots crunching against the snow as he approached. When he reached her, she was on her knees, barely able to lift her head. He quickly offered his hand, helping her to her feet. Her skin was a deep shade of blue, almost glowing in the dim light of the storm. Her eyes, too, were an intense shade of violet, and they met his with a look of desperation. "You need help," John said, more to himself than to her. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I am lost," she said, her voice thick with an accent John didn't recognize. "Please, I need shelter." John didn't hesitate. He knew the dangers of the ice fields better than anyone. The storms here could be lethal, and no one survived alone in these conditions. He wrapped her in his thickest coat and led her back to his small cabin. Once inside, he made sure she was warm, giving her a seat by the fire as he prepared food for them both. She ate slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she held the cup. John watched her closely, sensing that there was something more to this stranger than she was letting on. As she sat there, her eyes met his again, and for the first time, John noticed something strange about her. There was an aura of power that seemed to surround her, a quiet strength that didn't match her delicate appearance. He didn't ask questions. He figured that once she recovered, she'd explain herself. But as the hours passed, something unexpected happened. As the fire crackled in the corner, the woman's hand brushed against a small object that John hadn't noticed before, an ornate, glowing seal, which she wore on a chain around her neck. It glowed faintly, but as soon as her fingers touched it, the light grew brighter, almost blinding. John stepped back, startled by the sudden intensity of the light. The seal shimmered with an ethereal energy, and for a brief moment, John felt an overwhelming surge of power fill the room. The woman gasped, her eyes wide in shock. She looked at John, her expression one of deep surprise. "I didn't mean for it to activate," she said softly, her voice tinged with awe. "But, you..." John stared at her, confusion spreading across his face. "What is that? What just happened?" She hesitated for a moment, then placed a hand over the seal, her fingers tracing its edges gently. "This is my royal seal," she explained quietly. "It signifies my birthright, my connection to a power far beyond this world." John looked at her, stunned. He had no idea what she was talking about, but he could see that whatever she wasn't just a stranded traveler. She was someone of importance. And suddenly, the quiet, simple life he had known for so long seemed far too small for what was unfolding before him. John sat across from Alara, the glow of the fire casting flickering shadows on her delicate features. Her royal seal, still glowing faintly around her neck, seemed to hum with a quiet power. The air between them was thick with unspoken questions, but John didn't push her. He had learned long ago that sometimes, people needed their space to process things. "I didn't expect it to activate," Alara said, her voice almost lost in the crackling of the fire. "It usually only responds to my touch. But I've never had anyone else close to it before." John leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his mind racing with the implications of what he had just witnessed. So, what does that seal mean? Why did it react when you touched it? Alara hesitated for a moment, her gaze drifting to the seal, which now seemed to pulse in rhythm with her breath. It's not just a symbol of royalty, she explained slowly. It's a key, a connection to something much greater than I ever realized. She paused, as if gathering her thoughts. My people, the Tan, are an ancient race, scattered across the galaxy. This seal represents my right to rule, to lead them into the future. But, it's not just for leadership. She looked up at John, her violet eyes meeting his, and for the first time, he saw the weight of her burden. The seal holds power. The power to change things, to unlock ancient forces within me. John nodded, processing her words. He had no way of knowing what that meant, but he knew one thing for certain, he wasn't dealing with just any ordinary traveler. Alara wasn't here by accident. She was here because she had a purpose. And you think this, John gestured toward the seal, will help you? Alara's lips pressed together in a tight line. I don't know, she admitted. I've spent my life running from my destiny, but now I can feel it calling me. And I can feel the power inside me, growing stronger every day. She looked away, staring into the fire, lost in thought. John didn't say anything for a long time. He wasn't sure what to say. The idea of someone like Alara, someone who carried so much weight, so much responsibility, sitting in his small, humble cabin seemed surreal. But then again, everything about this day felt surreal. You're not like anyone I've ever met, John finally said, his voice soft. Alara glanced back at him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. I could say the same about you, she replied. You didn't turn me away. You didn't treat me like an alien. You just helped me. John didn't know why. He had done it. He didn't know what had compelled him to offer his help to someone he didn't even understand. But looking at Alara now, he realized it didn't matter. He had made a choice, and it had brought them here, together. The storm outside had intensified, the wind howling against the walls of the cabin. The temperature had dropped, and John could hear the soft crackle of ice forming against the windows. We'll need to move quickly, Alara said, her tone shifting. My people will come for me soon. They won't stop until they find me. John stood up, his muscles stiff from sitting too long. Then we'll have to be ready. He walked over to the small shelf by the door, grabbing his jacket and pulling it on. Alara watched him, her expression unreadable. Are you sure you want to help me? She asked, her voice soft but serious. John looked back at her, his eyes steady. I don't know what's coming, but I'm not going to turn my back on you now. He held her gaze for a moment before turning to the door. We need to get moving. The sooner we get out of here, the better. Alara stood slowly, her hand instinctively reaching for the royal seal around her neck. Thank you, she said quietly. For everything. John smiled, though it was a small, tight smile, filled with the weight of what lay ahead. Let's go, he said. Together, they walked toward the door, into the unknown. The storm outside raged, but inside, something had changed. They were no longer strangers. They were partners, bound together by fate, and by the mysterious power that lay hidden within Alara's royal seal. The cold wind howled outside, its relentless force shaking the cabin's walls. John adjusted his jacket, the fabric scraping against his arms as he tightened the straps on his boots. Alara stood by the window, her gaze fixed on the swirling snowstorm. Despite the heavy coat she wore, her skin still looked pale, a stark contrast to the deep, rich blue it once had. We have to move fast, John said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty that clouded his mind. He grabbed a small satchel off the table and slung it over his shoulder. Alara nodded, though her expression remained unreadable. Her hand reached instinctively for the royal seal at her neck, but she quickly pulled it away as if catching herself. It was clear that she was struggling to maintain control, not just of the situation, but of her emotions as well. I know, she replied softly, her voice barely audible above the wind. My people will come for me soon. They'll track me down if we don't get moving now. John hesitated for a moment, watching her. He could see the strength in her eyes, the quiet determination that had been there from the moment they first met. But there was also a vulnerability, something that made her seem more human than he had initially realized. He couldn't help but wonder what it had been like for her, hiding in plain sight all these years, pretending to be something she wasn't. "Do you want to talk about it?" John asked, his tone soft. Alara turned to face him, her violet eyes locking with his. For a moment, she didn't say anything. The weight of the question hung between them, unspoken. Finally, she exhaled sharply, a small sigh escaping her lips. "There's nothing to talk about," she said, her voice steady. "I've spent years running from my past. From my responsibilities. But now it's all catching up with me." She paused, looking down at her hands. "I never wanted any of this. But it's my fate, I suppose." John stepped closer, his eyes scanning her face, trying to gauge if she was truly fine or just hiding her fear. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, his voice firm. Alara gave him a tight smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've never done anything alone," she said quietly. "But that's the way it's always been." There was something in her voice, a quiet sorrow that spoke of years of isolation. John felt a pang of sympathy, but he didn't press further. They had no time for long conversations. "Let's go," he said, turning toward the door. Alara hesitated for a moment before following him, her footsteps light but measured. She was stronger than she let on, but John knew that strength could only carry someone so far. They needed more than just strength now. They needed a plan. As they stepped into the biting cold, the wind slammed against them, but John's mind was focused. He led the way, moving quickly across the icy terrain, his eyes scanning the horizon. Alara followed close behind, her eyes darting nervously from one side to the other. They walked in silence for what felt like hours, the snow crunching beneath their feet as they made their way through the frozen wilderness. Despite the cold, John couldn't shake the feeling that something was following them, lurking just beyond his field of vision. He glanced over at Alara, who seemed lost in thought, her face a mask of concentration. "Are you okay?" he asked, breaking the silence. Alara nodded without looking at him. "I'm fine. Just thinking." "About what?" John pressed. She glanced at him briefly, a flicker of something passing through her eyes. "About the future," she replied quietly. "About what happens when we get to the city. What happens after I face my people." John slowed his pace slightly, his brow furrowed. "You'll figure it out. We'll figure it out." Alara didn't respond, but John could tell she was processing his words. The silence stretched between them, but this time, it didn't feel as heavy. They were a team now, bound together by circumstance. As they approached the edge of the ice fields, John could see the faint outline of a distant city in the distance. The lights of the city flickered like a beacon in the storm, offering them a glimmer of hope. "We're almost there," John said, his voice low. Alara nodded, but there was a tension in her shoulders, a tightness that didn't escape his notice. They still had a long way to go, and the journey ahead would be anything but easy. The city loomed closer with each step they took. The once faint outline now appeared more solid, its bright lights gleaming through the swirling snowstorm. John led the way, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the path ahead. The storm had not let up, but the faint glimmer of the city's lights filled him with a sense of urgency. Alara walked beside him, her movements measured but tense. She was still lost in thought, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. John could tell that she was weighing her options, thinking of the moment when she would have to face her people. He didn't press her for conversation, understanding that silence was sometimes the only companion needed in moments like this. As they drew nearer to the outskirts of the city, John noticed the signs of civilization that appeared, the occasional structure peeking through the snow-covered landscape, the distant hum of generators providing warmth. They were almost there, but the air still felt heavy with uncertainty. "Do you know what will happen when we get there?" John asked, his voice breaking the silence between them. Alara paused for a moment before answering. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I haven't seen my people in years. They will expect answers." Her voice was steady, but there was a slight tremor beneath it, a crack in her otherwise calm demeanor. "And what do you want?" John asked, his voice soft. Alara glanced at him, her eyes meeting his for the first time in a while. "I want peace," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to fight, but I don't know if they'll allow that." The wind picked up again, blowing snow into their faces. John pulled his jacket tighter around him, feeling the cold seep through the fabric. He could see the city now, the tall buildings rising in the distance, their outlines barely visible through the storm. They had reached the gates, a large, imposing structure made of reinforced metal. The guards, dressed in uniforms that shimmered in the dim light, stood at attention as they approached. John's heart rate quickened. This was it. This was where everything changed. Alara stopped a few paces before the gates, her posture stiffening. John glanced over at her, sensing the tension in her body. She looked like she was preparing for something monumental. "Alara," he said quietly, stepping closer to her. She turned to him, her violet eyes meeting his once again. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but full of emotion. "I never thought I would find someone like you, someone who would help me without asking for anything in return." John nodded, though he didn't feel he deserved any thanks. He had only done what anyone in his position would have done. But he understood the gravity of her words. She was about to step into a world where she had no control, where everything she knew could come crashing down. He was her anchor in this storm, and he would not let go. The guards at the gate stepped forward, their eyes scanning both of them. Alara took a deep breath, her shoulders squared, and raised her chin slightly. "I am Alara of the Tan Dominion," she said, her voice firm and strong, despite the doubt that lingered in her mind. "I request an audience with my people." The guard nearest to her nodded, his face unreadable. "You may enter," he said, his voice cold but respectful. With a single glance at John, Alara stepped forward, her footsteps steady as she walked through the gates. John followed closely behind, his heart pounding in his chest. They were no longer just two strangers in the cold. They were part of something much bigger now. As they passed through the gates and into the heart of the city, John couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The buildings were massive, their towering structures lit up by holographic displays and neon lights that seemed to pulse with energy. This was a world that existed beyond anything he had ever known, a world filled with secrets and power, and yet, it felt more real than anything he had ever experienced. Alara's presence in this world was undeniable. She was part of it, whether she wanted to be or not. And as they walked deeper into the city, John knew that the next steps they took would determine everything. Whatever came next, he would stand by her. He had no idea what the future held, but he knew one thing: they were in this together. They entered the heart of the city, and the towering structures loomed around them, casting long shadows in the cold night. John could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, but he remained focused, keeping pace with Alara. The air was filled with the hum of distant energy fields and the software of technology that seemed to pulse in time with the city itself. Alara moved with purpose, her expression still guarded but resolute. She had not spoken much since they entered the gates, but John could sense the storm of thought swirling behind her calm exterior. As they walked deeper into the city, the streets grew busier, filled with various alien species, their voices a symphony of foreign languages. Despite the crowds, a strange sense of isolation hung in the air around Alara. John could see how the others glanced at her, some with curiosity, others with suspicion. He could only imagine the weight she carried, knowing that her presence here was a beacon of attention. "This way," Alara said suddenly, her voice breaking through the hum of the city. She gestured toward a large building at the end of the street, its sleek surface shimmering in the dim light. It was clearly a place of importance. As they neared the entrance, two guards stepped forward, their eyes scanning them both. Alara stopped, taking a deep breath. "I need to speak with the council," she said, her voice steady, though John could hear the tension beneath it. The guards exchanged a look before nodding, stepping aside to allow them through. Inside, the atmosphere shifted immediately. The air was cooler here, and the lighting was dim, casting long shadows across the room. The walls were adorned with intricate symbols and designs, marking the history of the Tan people. At the far end of the room, a large table sat, surrounded by figures in elaborate robes. The council. Alara walked forward, her steps measured, and John followed closely behind. The members of the council watched her with unreadable expressions, their eyes cold and calculating. Alara, one of them said, their voice deep and commanding. You have returned. I have, Alara replied, her tone unwavering. And I seek an audience to discuss the future of our people. The council members exchanged glances, but none of them spoke. John stayed silent, standing a few paces behind Alara. He wasn't sure what kind of discussion was about to unfold, but he could feel the tension in the room. The weight of the moment was palpable. You understand the implications of your return? Another council member asked, their voice sharp. You left. You turned your back on your people. I did not leave, Alara responded, her voice growing stronger. I was forced to hide. To protect myself from those who sought to use me. And now you return, uninvited, with a human by your side. The tone was accusatory, but Alara didn't flinch. He has helped me. Without him, I would not have made it this far. The council members exchanged another set of glances. There was a brief, uncomfortable silence before one of them spoke again. You have brought shame upon your family, Alara, they said. Your actions have consequences. I know, Alara said, her voice softening but still firm. But I am here now, and I will do what I can to change the course of our people's future. No matter the cost. The room fell silent again, the weight of her words hanging in the air. John could see the resolve in her eyes, and for the first time, he truly understood the depth of her burden. She wasn't just running from her past. She was fighting for her future. A future that could shape the fate of an entire civilization. He had no idea what would happen next, but he knew one thing, he would stand by her. No matter what the council decided, he wouldn't let her face this alone. Alara's gaze shifted to John, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. There was a flicker of something between them, recognition, perhaps, or something deeper. Whatever it was, it strengthened the bond between them. She wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was someone he had come to care about. And that made whatever came next even more important. We will consider your request, one of the council members said, breaking the silence. But understand this, Alara. Your return does not come without a price. Alara nodded, her expression unreadable. I am prepared to pay it, she said. I have no choice. As the council members deliberated, John stood in silence, his mind racing with the possibilities of what might happen next. But for the first time since meeting Alara, he felt a sense of certainty. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The council's decision would come soon enough. But John was no longer just a bystander in this story. He was part of it, and that made all the difference. The council's chamber was thick with silence as they deliberated. Alara stood tall at the center of the room, her back straight, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She had never felt more exposed, but her determination was unwavering. The council members exchanged whispers, their voices low and harsh, barely audible over the hum of the room's energy systems. John stood off to the side, leaning against the cold stone wall, his gaze fixed on Alara. He could see the tension in her posture, the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her shoulders. For all her strength, she was still just one person, standing before a powerful assembly that held her fate in their hands. John felt a pang of helplessness, but he knew there was nothing he could do but stand beside her and offer whatever support he could. He had already seen the way she carried herself, how she managed to maintain control despite the uncertainty. But he also saw the cracks in her armor, the flicker of doubt, the fear she tried to hide. The council's leader, a tall figure with sharp features and eyes that seemed to pierce through the very fabric of the room, cleared their throat. The room fell into complete silence. Alara of the Tan Dominion, they began, their voice cold and firm. You have returned after years of absence. You have shown no regard for your duty or your family's legacy. And yet, here you stand, demanding an audience with us. What makes you think you can simply return and reclaim your place? Alara's eyes flashed, her chin lifting slightly as she met the council member's gaze. I never abandoned my people, she said, her voice steady. I was forced to hide. To protect myself from those who would use me for their own gain. But I am here now, and I will do everything in my power to restore honor to my name and my people. The council leader's eyes narrowed. You speak of restoration, yet you bring a human with you. A being from a species we barely understand. What role do they play in your return? Alara glanced briefly at John, her expression softening for the briefest of moments. This human has helped me, she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of truth. Without him, I would not have made it this far. He is not just a stranger. He is someone who has proven his loyalty, his strength, and his integrity. The council members exchanged skeptical looks, their whispers growing louder. John could feel the weight of their gaze, but he refused to back down. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to cower now. A human, another council member spoke up, their voice tinged with disbelief. Helping the heir to the Tan Dominion? Ridiculous. It is not ridiculous, Alara responded, her tone now firm and unwavering. It is the truth. And I will not allow you to dismiss it. This human, John, has shown me that there is more to loyalty than simply bloodlines or titles. He has proven that strength comes in many forms, and that loyalty is earned, not inherited. There was a long pause. As the council members absorbed her words, John stood in the silence, his hands clenched into fists, his pulse quickening. He could see the council members weighing Alara's words, their expressions shifting from skepticism to something harder to read. The leader of the council leaned forward slightly, their eyes narrowing as they looked at John. Very well, they said, their voice carrying the weight of finality. We will allow you to speak, human. But know this, your presence here is a challenge. You are not one of us, and your involvement in our affairs will be closely scrutinized. Do not think that your actions will go unnoticed. John nodded once, his voice steady as he spoke. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to help. I understand that this is a matter of great importance, and I don't take it lightly. The council leader's gaze flicked to Alara before returning to John. We shall see, they said, their tone dismissive. Now, Alara, you will have your audience. But know this, you will be watched. And your future, along with that of this human, will depend on the choices you make from here on out. Alara nodded, her posture straightening as she braced herself for whatever would come next. The council had spoken, but the battle was far from over. John could see the weight of the situation on her shoulders, but he could also see the fire in her eyes. She wasn't going to give up. Not now, not ever. As the council members turned their attention away from them, Alara stepped forward, her head held high. John followed closely behind her, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they had come this far. And now, they would face the future, whatever it might hold. The council chamber was silent as Alara stood before them, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of the moment was heavier than any storm she had faced in the icy fields. The council, a collection of some of the most powerful figures in the Tan Dominion, watched her intently, their expressions unreadable. John stood by her side, a steady presence in a sea of doubt. Alara could feel the eyes of the council members on her, their gaze assessing, calculating. They had listened to her, yes, but the true test was only just beginning. The leader of the council, an older figure with sharp features and piercing eyes, broke the silence. You claim that you seek peace, Alara. But peace is not something that can be given freely. It is earned, through action, through sacrifice. Alara straightened, her voice firm as she spoke. I understand that. I have no intention of simply asking for peace. I am here to restore the Dominion to its rightful path, to undo the mistakes that have been made. The council leader's gaze softened slightly, but only for a moment. And what of this human, they asked, their eyes flicking toward John. You speak of your people, but you bring an outsider into this. A being from another world. What role does he play in your vision for the future? John tensed, but Alara placed a hand on his arm, steadying him. John has proven himself to be more than just an outsider, she said, her voice unwavering. He has helped me when no one else would. His loyalty is not to me alone, but to the idea that anyone, regardless of their origin, can make a difference. The council members exchanged looks, their expressions unreadable. Alara could sense the tension rising in the room. They were not convinced, and she knew she had to prove her worth. You speak of loyalty, the council leader said slowly. But what about responsibility? What about the weight of your actions? You may have helped our people in the past, Alara, but your absence has created chaos. The balance of power has shifted, and we must now decide whether you are the answer, or if the future of the Dominion lies elsewhere. Alara's heart sank, but she held her ground. I do not expect forgiveness for my past actions, she said, her voice steady. But I believe that we can rebuild, if we work together. The people of the Dominion deserve better. They deserve a leader who will fight for them, not for power, but for the future of the Dominion itself. The silence in the room stretched on, heavy and thick. The council members remained still, their eyes fixed on Alara as if searching for the truth in her words. John could feel the tension mounting, but he trusted Alara. She had come this far, and he knew that whatever happened next, she would fight for what was right. Finally, the council leaders spoke again, their voice calm but authoritative. We will consider your words, Alara, they said. But know this, your actions will determine your fate, and the fate of the Dominion. You have been given a second chance, but that is all. Make it count. Alara nodded, her expression resolute. I will not fail, she said softly, but with a certainty that left no room for doubt. As the council members turned their attention away from her, John placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a silent gesture of support. They had made it this far. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The future of the Dominion was uncertain, but with Alara's determination and John's unwavering support, they would carve their own path forward. And as they left the council chamber, the weight of the decision still hung in the air, but there was a sense of hope that had not been there before. Alara's journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt as though she was on the right path. As Alara and John walked away from the council chamber, the weight of the moment lingered in the air. The cold city streets felt different now, more oppressive than before. John could feel the tension in Alara's every step, but there was also a flicker of hope in her eyes, a hope he hadn't seen since their journey began. She had spoken with such conviction, but he knew that words were only the beginning. Actions, as the council had said, would be the true test. They had barely made it a few steps when Alara stopped, her expression distant. John glanced at her, unsure of what to say. What is it? He asked softly. Alara's eyes flicked to him, a small, strained smile tugging at her lips. It's all so overwhelming, she confessed. I've spent so long running from this moment, from the responsibility of it all. And now that it's here, I can't help but feel unprepared. John placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a reassuring squeeze. You don't have to do this alone, he said, his voice steady. I'm with you, every step of the way. Alara nodded, her gaze softening. I know, she whispered. And I'm grateful. They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of the city, but it felt like they were the only two people in the world. The noise of the city faded into the background as John focused on Alara. For the first time since they arrived, he saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of the crown she had never wanted. But there was strength there, too, an unyielding resolve that had carried her through countless trials. What's next? John asked, breaking the silence. Now that we've made it this far, what do we do? Alara's eyes flicked to the towering structures that surrounded them, the gleaming lights of the city reflecting in her eyes. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. But I do know one thing. I can't go back. Not to the life I left behind. John nodded. And you won't have to. You're not alone in this. She met his gaze, and for a moment, there was a quiet understanding between them. They were in this together, no matter what came next. Thank you, Alara said, her voice thick with emotion. For everything. John smiled softly. It's just the beginning, Alara. We'll figure it out. They continued walking, the weight of their conversation settling between them. John had no idea what the future held, but he was certain of one thing: he would stand by her, no matter what came their way. The path ahead wasn't clear, but they would face it together. And as they walked deeper into the city, with its towering buildings and unfamiliar streets, John realized that this journey, whatever it was only the beginning of something much bigger. He had no idea what Alara's future held, but he knew that whatever happened, they would face it side by side. The city might be full of danger, of uncertainty, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of purpose. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And for Alara, that was all that mattered. As they continued walking through the city, the towering structures seemed to close in on them, but John and Alara walked side by side, their steps in sync. The streets were alive with activity, alien voices filled the air, colorful market stalls lined the sides of the roads, and distant ships zoomed across the sky, their engines humming like a well-oiled machine. Despite the hustle and bustle of the city, there was a quiet tension between them, an unspoken understanding that the real work had only just begun. John noticed how Alara kept her head high, her posture regal, despite the uncertainty in her eyes. She was a leader, but one who had been cast out from her own world, and now, with every step, she was forging a new path. "Do you ever miss it?" John asked, breaking the silence. "Your old life? Before all this?" Alara didn't immediately respond, her gaze still fixed ahead. She seemed lost in thought for a moment, processing the question. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "I don't know what I miss," she said, her voice carrying a quiet sadness. "The life I had was never truly mine. It was a life shaped by expectations, by duty. I didn't have a choice in it." John nodded, understanding more than she realized. He had never known such a life, but he had seen enough of the world to know that it was easy to become trapped by the roles society forced upon you. "And now?" he asked. "Now, I have a choice," Alara replied, her eyes locking onto his for a brief moment. "And I intend to make the most of it." They walked in silence for a few moments, the weight of her words hanging between them. John wasn't sure what was to come, but he knew that Alara was on the verge of something big. The council had given her a chance, but the road ahead was filled with obstacles, old alliances, new enemies, and the constant struggle to prove herself in a world that had already judged her. As they approached a tall building, Alara slowed her pace. The structure was sleek and imposing, its glass walls reflecting the lights of the city like a mirror. She turned to John, her expression unreadable. "This is it," she said quietly. "The place where it all begins." John followed her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the gravity of the moment. This wasn't just another building, it was a symbol of everything that Alara had fought for. Everything that she had risked. Together, they entered the building, the doors sliding open with a soft hiss. Inside, the atmosphere was cool, the air thick with the scent of incense and polished wood. The room was sparsely decorated, with only a few chairs arranged around a long table. At the far end of the room sat a figure, their face hidden in the shadows. As they approached, the figure stood, their movements smooth and calculated. "Alara," the voice said, low and measured. "You've come." Alara's eyes narrowed, but her voice remained steady. "I've come to claim what's mine," she said, her words carrying a weight that made the air feel thicker. The figure stepped forward, their face coming into the light. It was a woman, with dark skin and sharp features, her eyes filled with intelligence and wariness. "You think you can just waltz in here and take what belongs to you?" the woman asked, her voice laced with contempt. "You're a fool, Alara. The Dominion doesn't bend to the whims of an exile." Alara stood tall, her eyes never leaving the woman's face. "I'm not here for the Dominion," she said firmly. "I'm here for my people. And I will do whatever it takes to ensure their future." The woman chuckled softly, her arms crossed. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Alara didn't flinch. "I have a better idea than you think." John stood by her side, watching the exchange. He could see the fire in Alara's eyes, the determination that had been there from the very beginning. She wasn't backing down, not now, not ever. The woman in front of them might have power, but Alara had something more. She had the will to fight for what was right. You're not the only one who wants to see the Dominion thrive, the woman said, her tone shifting slightly. But you have no idea what it will take to get there. Alara stepped forward, her posture regal once again. Then show me, she said, her voice unwavering. Because I won't stop until I've done everything in my power to bring the future back to the people who need it most. The woman's eyes softened for a moment, a flicker of something resembling respect passing through her gaze. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. You're brave, Alara, she said quietly. But bravery alone will not save you. Then I will do what it takes, Alara replied firmly. John could feel the weight of her words, and for the first time, he felt certain. They were on the right path, and no matter how difficult the road ahead, they would face it together. The woman stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. Then let's begin.